space. Now, as we continue things, we're going into our next panel session, which will be focusing on artificial intelligence, digital innovations, and the future of journalism. And I know this is also going to be a very interesting panel as well. We'll also have an opportunity for questions, so please get your questions ready. Again, keeping them straight to the point, simple and short. Let me introduce the panelists that are making their way to the stage now. I'll start with Joshua Olufemi. Joshua, please make your way to the stage. He's the founder of Data Fights. He's a social entrepreneur who firmly believes in the power of data and technology in promoting media sustainability in Africa. He has also spearheaded multiple product innovations and journalism development programs throughout West Africa. Joshua, welcome. Thank you so much. All right, joining him next is Christopher Guess, and Christopher is a journalist. Please a round of applause for Christopher. He's a journalist and computer scientist based in New York, where he leads the technology research at Duke University's Reporters Lab. Now, his focus for the past 5 years has been on automated fact-checking, and he has also previously been an ICFJ Knights Fellow at the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project based in Europe. Christopher, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Joining them as well, David Adeleke. David is a journalist and media analyst. He is currently the Africa editor at Rest of the World, a publication exploring the impact of technology outside the Western bubble. He also publishes Communique, which is a media and tech analysis newsletter with over 40,000 subscribers. Please a round of applause for David. I believe Serena is meant to join us online. Serena Stelitano. She's a metaverse designer, builder, and curator at the CCIJ. Now, her curiosity for visual storytelling and multi-sensorial journeys has constantly informed her research. Now, from a traditional and digital artist, she's moved since 2017 to experimenting with crypto art, NFTs, for those of you invested and interested, in Web3 as well. So as we link up with Serena online, she'll also be joining us. A round of applause for Serena. And moderating this panel is someone I will say is a colleague. We both share one thing in common, making the list of the most powerful women in journalism in Nigeria. Please a round of applause for me and Maokwe, who's going to be the moderator. Maokwe Ogun Yusuf is a seasoned broadcast journalist with 15 years of experience under her belt, and she's currently supervising producer and presenter at Channels, where she co-anchors the station's primetime daily breakfast show, Sunrise Daily, and also produces and presents Hard Copy. Please a round of applause for Maokwe. So again, don't forget the conversations here. Let's take them online as well. Use the hashtag WAJEC2023. Raise your questions when the time for questions and answers come, and let's enjoy ourselves. I'm handing it over to Maokwe.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adeleke. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. Tolulope, thank you very much for that very swift introduction. And we have more than one thing in common. It might interest you to know that in my language, my name and your name mean the same thing. So my name translated into Yoruba will be Tolulope. I hope that that's also very comforting for you. Oh, well, thank you so much to CJID for putting this together. I think that you were born for a time such as this, talking about journalism, innovation, and development. And for me today, I'm here as a sponge. I don't know about you. I'm here to learn. I'm here to hear what the ideas are around innovation and development, especially as regards the field of journalism. Only recently, I had I don't know whether it's the fortune of reading a book. It's titled Truth, Merchant of Truth. It is written by Jill Abramson. I don't know if you've seen that book, but it's definitely a book that I will recommend. Very interesting book about, just where we are at and, perhaps the future of this. I've been saddled with moderating a session talking about artificial intelligence, digital innovations, and the future of journalism. For those who are wondering what artificial intelligence will have to do with our jobs, I don't know if we're able to draw the connection already, but whether or not you understand artificial intelligence is already here to stay with us. Talking about deep fakes, talking about breaking news, I mean, all the other things that are coming up in terms of trying to ensure that technology drives the profession which we currently are in, and the dangers around it. But right now, we're not looking at the dangers. We're looking at innovation and the future of this, I shall say, noble profession called journalism. So I'm going to start with very brilliant members of my panel. I'm going to say very sincerely that I did try to check out Serena Stelitano, and interestingly, I found nothing on her on the internet. And when Tolulope talked about crypto, I said, oh, maybe that explains it. The people who try to, play behind the scenes. So I'm going to start with you, David Adeleke. You are the Africa editor of the Rest of the World. And I found your area very interesting, the fact that you're trying to do news outside of what you call the Western bubble. What precisely has made you choose that? Because it would seem that really, I mean, a lot of what it is that we're doing, a lot of contemporary journalists do is take a cue from what the major media houses are reporting. So what exactly has made you say, this is what you want to do, and how are you finding it, doing it, and also getting your message heard, considering the fact that this is what you're doing outside of a bubble?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So let's, just to be clear, I'm not the founder of the publication. I just work at Rest of World, not Rest of the World, Rest of World. And so essentially what we do at Rest of World is we focus on the impact of tech outside of the Western bubble. Usually when we are having these conversations, the focus is often on America, Canada, and developed Europe. And there's very little consideration for the impact of all of these massive innovations on Africa, Latin America, and these other parts of the world, or as you would have it, the rest of the world. So that's essentially what we do. We're trying to focus, or we're trying to shine the light or spotlight all these fantastic places, people doing fantastic things in different parts of the world, and bring it to the fore as well. For example, this morning I was editing a story from Zimbabwe about the biggest fast food company in Zimbabwe created one of the fastest growing fintech products in the country. That's not the kind of thing that you probably see in the US, or maybe the kind of thing that you see in the US with Starbucks, but you don't often hear that in other parts of the world. So that's an example of the type of the work that we are doing.
How would you say that you're getting your voice heard? I mean, it's one thing to do such a story. How does it then get consumed by everybody else if it's not on, well, I say, on the space where most people would normally see that type of news?
I mean, we distribute our stories the same way any other publication would. We have our website, and we're very active on socials. As a matter of fact, we have some relationship to Google, our founder, Sophie. We distribute our stories the same way every other platform does. We invest in just the same way Richard was talking about earlier, that journalists need to adapt to the times. We do a lot of repurposing our content. We're very active on Instagram, for instance. We repurpose our content for Instagram stories, for Instagram carousels, and all of that. So, I mean, if you go to restofworld.org, you can see our stories there.
Certainly an opportunity to advertise.
You asked.
Indeed, I did. Well, listening to the last session, I mean, the number of questions that were raised in that particular session were quite interesting, and I have to say that, it's not surprising. It's a room full of journalists, and that's what they do. I mean, that's what we do for a living. We ask questions. our curiosity is piqued, and thankfully, Richard, you were great in providing those answers. And I don't think you should. It's a good thing you were not really on the defensive. I think that nowadays when people talk about income generation and Google, or Google having 80% of the ads, sometimes I think that they kind of use Google and the internet interchangeably, and I think that might be a good thing. So maybe you might want to consider that. But let me come to Christopher now. He's with Duke's Reporters Laboratory, and when I looked at your profile, I'm going to be very honest, I said, oh, this is the kind of thing my father would have wanted me to be, a computer scientist and a journalist, perhaps. He tried, but he didn't succeed. I mean, he was a computer scientist himself, or he is a computer scientist himself. And I found it very interesting. I mean, it was never a genre we thought would have intertwined, say, some 20 years ago, computer journalism and, computer science and journalism. But maybe that's what we should call it now, computer science journalism. Maybe, I don't know if there's such a genre. So I was going to ask you, how have you found in recent times with the development of the kind of technology that we've had, could we have seen where we'll be 20 years on? I mean, from, say, 20 years ago.
So the question is, would we be able to predict the world as it is now 20 years ago? Yeah. 20 years ago, perhaps. We were right on that cusp. I started in this field about 17 years ago. So I remember that time period when, we had modern websites. YouTube had been founded, not bought by Google yet, but was still up there, and people had hosting and broadband by then. And I'm speaking of course, in the West here. Though I did live in East Africa at the same time and was absolutely astonished that I could get better cell service in the middle of Tanzania than I could in Wisconsin, where I'm from. So there, it's been a bit of a hop and leap. I think, yes, we could have guessed about 3/4 of where we're at, to answer your question. Yeah.
And can we tell, I mean, with benefit of hindsight now, looking at where we currently are, do you think that we can tell where we're going, what the future is going to be, considering where we currently are?
Not a chance in hell. When I said 3/4, the reason I left off 25% there is because there's a lot of fits and starts. Just even, not to speak ill of one of the other panelists, but a year ago, if you went to a tech conference, every single talk was about NFTs and blockchain and how it's going to save the internet, and I was the only voice, and I got screamed at a number of conferences for saying that was probably not going to be the case, and yeah, it turns out correct. 2 years ago was the metaverse. Facebook changed their name. Did not take off, right? Maybe Apple will get a little bit of part of that, but it turns out people don't like to live in completely virtual realms where they can't even reach a cup of coffee, right? Without possibly spilling it over. There was the whole pivot to video in journalism about 5 to 10 years ago, which decimated newsrooms, right? Turns out Facebook was absolutely lying about all their numbers, but convinced every newsroom to basically fire these guys, and including myself. I started as a career in photojournalism and switched to video, and it turns out none of the numbers were actually there. And so we're going to have a lot of fits and starts. We're going to have a lot of backtracks, but the fundamentals of journalism don't change, right? You're still telling a damn story. And so as long as we stick to that, we'll be able to hopefully surf those waves.
How would you say, and I think maybe this is where I should have started, how would you say that artificial intelligence has impacted the work of journalists? Has it been for good, or would you say that the positives have been far outweighed by the negatives?
The negatives are a lot more apparent right now. Journalists, ChatGPT hit the scene in November, right? Now, large language models and those sorts of things have been in development for decades, right? The first sort of nascent neural network was in the 1950s. But the bad guys are going to jump on something faster, then journalists will be able to catch up for a long time. And the simple fact is that journalism doesn't pay as well as misinformation often, right? If you want to make money, you're going to get some of the most ambitious people who don't care about ethics, don't care about checking themselves. They're going to jump first because there's just less scruples to have to, and less discussions to have about them.
Well, I know that we're trying to keep the conversation frank, but for me, it's already scary enough as it is, and I'm really wondering, about AI. I've seen, fears expressed about it, and whether or not it can be brought under control. But let's talk to somebody who might have an idea about that. Mr. Olufemi, founder and publisher of DataFight, you have developed quite a number of tools over time. And I'm sure that different circumstances would have necessitated your development of those tools. Looking at that, where we currently are at, and the impact that digital innovations are having on the practice of journalism. Some of them have been very good, but others have been quite concerning. And looking at what he said about the fact that the negatives have been more apparent than the positives, and the fact that it's going to be very difficult for journalists to catch up. Do you have any suggestions as to how it is that we can continue to stick with the truth, with facts, and continue to keep people very well informed in spite of the dangers around or the downsides of artificial intelligence?
Thank you. Suggestion how to keep at what we do. I think it would be to first understand that it's a purpose, right? And we need to do everything to ensure that we keep the goal in front of us. I think that's the first thing to. I think everyone can hear me, right? Okay, so I probably need to project. Okay. Is it better? Okay, so I should use that one. Okay. All right, thank you. Okay. So I think the purpose of journalism is the first thing we need to hold there, no matter what. If I look back 2014 when I was called to answer the question of how can we, innovate revenue sustainability for the media. The first question is, what is the purpose of media if it's not to, educate, inform, and to hold democracy there, right? And doing that is, I think, the first thing that journalism needs to hold, keep strong. How do I mean? I keep saying the same thing all over again, right? It's, if we fail to understand that technology remains a tool to drive the purpose of our work, and taking that tool to answer every question or to innovate around every challenge, then it seems that it will look as if we're cowards. Sorry for using that strong word. And that's one thing I was saying with journalism, that we like to challenge everything that is supposed to help our work. I see the question around, and I used to be part of that place where we say Google, Facebook is taking over the business, right? But the question is, the same Google, Facebook is what we are using to reach places we couldn't reach. So instead of challenging that tool or resigning to say, oh, you know what, I can't beat AI today, AI is going to take my job. I think the question should be to satisfy the social purpose of journalism. How can I use artificial intelligence, every other digital tool, to answer that question? I was saying it to a friend, and I think I was saying it to Richard as well, that community media was where I started my work in 2006. And today, if there was any aspect of democracy in Nigeria that I think we need to still explore using artificial intelligence, I think it will be community journalism. Why are small businesses in those villages able to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to sell, but can't reach the journalism, the story we want to tell? The democracy that we all felt was lost during the election was because community media couldn't do as much. We all gone to social media, which was only satisfying less than 50% of the population. How can we ensure that that purpose of journalism, educating, informing, inciting people, to take action, to hold themselves accountable, to hold institutions accountable, and more importantly, to decide, to make the right decisions. We, ensure that journalism, use every other tool that is out there. Technology first. Technology first. Thanks to, and I always do this, to Dapolori of me, who said to me in 2014, I want us to think of Premium Times not as a media organization, but as a technology company in the business of media. And I think journalism starts to think in that way and say, everything we've done is been one technology or the other, from print to broadcast to electronic, right? We technologists first. So why do we think that there's something we can't do with technology?
Well, it's a big question. I think that sometimes it's not really about technology. I think it's about the stability of technology. And I'm speaking from the perspective of a practitioner, somebody, who has seen how, for instance, I became a broadcast journalist from seeing people on TV, and I thought, oh, I'd like to do this. Broadcast journalism has been there for many years, but we know that even that is changing. Well, I would not say we're in competition. Satellite TV has come to help us all, hasn't it? But then it has also provided many choices. People will talk about how in Nigeria, and I think that this might be a bit strange to our, international audience, we had just one national broadcast house, whom we all waited for at 4 p.m. to come alive. Does anybody remember that time? I see coppers here. They might not know the time I'm talking about. Yes, but that was how it was. At 4 p.m., you hear the national anthem, and ta-da, ta-da, and then that's when TV started, and it's what, sorry? I'm sorry. Oh, yes, indeed. And then, it went up, I think, at about 12 midnight, and that was it. That was it for the day. And I'm going to come to Serena in a bit. Thank you so much for that reminder. But over the years, we've since found, CNN was introduced, I think, in the 90s. I don't know when precisely now, but that's when I started seeing CNN. We had cable TV in good time. And before you know what's happening, it was liberalized. TV was liberalized in Nigeria, and it provided many more opportunities. But we've since seen that audiences are changing. There's now social media. There is Facebook. There is Google. There is Instagram. There's Twitter. And all of these things are competing for people's attention. And because the media is in the business of getting the attention of the people, it also has to evolve. And it seems that it's evolving so many times over. It has to be nimble. If it isn't, it can't catch up. And at the same time, even within those platforms, there are things that are catching other people's interest. So Richard was asking us to be interesting, to make ourselves a little more interesting, to know how to write our stories. But then you have to ask, how many more things am I supposed to learn in one lifetime? How many times do I have to keep evolving? But it's since come out that if you do not evolve, you're going to become a dinosaur. That's what you're going to become. So let me take this to Serena. And I do not know how AI has impacted your work at the Center for Collaborative Investigative Journalism. I say this with all, sense of respect, because to be honest, I really did try to find something on you, but it was really, really hard. Was that deliberate?
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here among such bright minds, and I'm very much enjoying this conversation. And yes, it is deliberate. Actually, I'm much known into the space of, now we call it the metaverse, with my alias, which is Serste, which is a simple contraption of my name and surname. And so, yes, you cannot really find much about me online with my actual name. And I love the idea of considering all these you cited already tools, technology that we can explore if we want to, of course. It's not mandatory in any case, as it wasn't for the NFTs or other technologies, the televisions as well. So for me, the main impact we can try to have, and we try to have at the CCAJ with our research, is to bring immersive and interactive designs into the reportage and the data sets and data graphics we have. All is produced, of course, by the reporters and the data scientists. We collaborate and in-house the team members of the CCAJ. And so, yes, I'm simply a tool myself to bring these stories alive into a virtual reality, and also perhaps into the digital assets tokenization and relative value chain.
Okay, it does appear that your audio, yeah, I think she's done. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for that intervention in that regard. But I mean, I was speaking to the fact that, you know, it's for a number of journalists, I mean, for a number of media houses now, they're finding that you can either take advantage of the tools, continue to innovate with them, or you become a dinosaur, you lose your audience, as the case might be. And very interesting suggestion that Richard made about, you know, knowing your audience. Do you really know your audience? Very, very interesting. And that's something I'm certainly going to take back to our organization. But let me ask you, I mean, looking at the opportunities digital innovations present to journalists, do you think that there is so much more that we haven't explored? Or do you think that right now we should stick with what we have and see how we can take the most advantage of it, you know, to maximize or to leverage on what we currently have? I don't know, maybe to reach bigger audiences, maybe to explore stories a little more further. I don't know, but do you think that we should be seeking to innovate a lot more? And if your answer is yes, in what areas?
I think there are two ways to think about innovation generally, but in this context for journalism, there are things that will always stay the same, elements of human behavior. That's why I really like the point that Richard made about understanding your audience. Really what he's saying is understanding how human beings behave. So what are the things that have been constant from the beginning of time? Emotions, desires, needs, and all of that, versus how people express those things. So that's really what changes. Human behavior is constant. For billions of years, we've always acted the same. But how we behave, how we interact with our environment, how we interact with information, how we communicate, those are the things that have changed, right? And I think as a journalist, if you really want to remain relevant, and I mean, I understand the irony of saying this as someone so young, but if you really want to remain relevant for so long, I think it's very important to understand the things that stay the same, so that you're not consistently chasing trends. Like Christopher said, last that have stayed the same over time. So interact or investigate what those elements are, so that you be grounded, and then you now understand the things that are always going to change. For instance, again, I keep making reference to his speech because it was so good, but when TV came, I mean, if you read history, people thought TV was going to be the end of human history. We are all going to be so stupid. We're all going to be this. And then TV came with all these magnificent opportunities. It's the same thing with the internet. At the dawn of the internet, people thought this thing is going to destroy the world, or this thing is never going to take off. And then the internet is where it is right now, right? It's the same thing with AI. There's always going to be new technologies, but some elements of human behavior will stay the same. So figure out what those things will be. I mean, I can't tell you everything now, and that's why psychology, sociology, and all these things will always remain relevant, because they help you understand what people like, how people think. When you understand that, then you know how people interact with new technologies, and then that's where the hard work comes in. Mm-hmm. You understand how you can learn those tools. For instance, AI. I don't think okay, let me rephrase that. You can be afraid of AI, but you can also understand that there are opportunities that come with this thing. Because if you really think about it, in a few years, all the conversations would disappear. All the conversations with AI would disappear into the background, because the technology itself will fade into the background, and all you're going to be thinking about is, what's that? Who's that? And all you're going to be thinking about is the tools that the AI is powering. I mean, you're not thinking about your computer in terms of microchips today, right? Mm-hmm. You're just using your computer to become more productive. It's the same way when you use Grammarly.
The Tao of...
What is going on? All right. Okay.
Okay, I think we might need our guest who's online to either mute or, yeah.
All right. Where was I? I was talking about Grammarly, right? Yeah. So Grammarly is powered by machine learning, which is a type of artificial intelligence, right? Yeah. But you're not thinking about Grammarly in the sense that this thing is going to take my job, right? You're using it because you know that this thing is going to make you better. It's the same thing with ChatGPT. Oh, ChatGPT is going to render... Yeah, it will render some people redundant, especially if your article can't... Like, if you can't write as well as a chatbot, why wouldn't you be able to do that anyway? But it says a lot about how technology is going to impact how we work, right? And I think it's going to force people to become better. It's going to help people to become better, just the same way your computer helps you be more productive. Your phone can help you be more productive. Artificial intelligence tools are going to help you become more productive. So then the onus is on you to figure out how to improve yourself and learn new skills.
Well, thank you for that. But you said that you have to understand the things that stay the same to remain relevant. So you're not just chasing everything, mm-hmm. but you must understand that is hard.
Oh yes.
Yes. I don't know. Are you able to offer any tips on that? First, I don't know if you agree with him. Christopher, I don't know if you agree with him.
I agree with him on every single point he just made, yes. I was going to make the exact same points. I'm just like crossing notes out now.
Indeed, because I saw your head bobbing up and down.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, you must also admit that it's incredibly hard to know the things that are going to remain. For instance, who was going to know that NFTs were not going to be popular anymore? The way they took over the internet, you will feel a fool if you didn't know a thing about NFTs. How are we to know that they're going to fade away so soon? Maybe they'll still come back, who knows? But right now, as he admitted, they're not all the rage anymore.
Right. Yeah, when it comes to that, I realized it back, 2012, 2013, when I was in Paris and I saw a cafe that was like, we accept Bitcoin. I'm like, oh, cool, I'll try this thing out. And I had to download an app, load money, buy crypto, and even after all that, it still took 15 minutes to check out at the store. I could have just dropped a €5 note, and I was just like, oh yeah, no, this is crap. Okay, if it's unusable for me to buy a glass of wine, it's unusable as an actual currency, right? So the crypto thing's probably a bad example because I've been a naysayer for a decade on that. But how do you not chase the dragon is a really, really tough thing, especially because you're dealing with so many competing voices. Like you as the reporter might know that this isn't what you need to be focusing on. You need to be focusing on developing your sources, writing your stories, investigating claims, etc. But your boss is hearing from the board of directors that you should check this out because one big investor's nephew is really big into this company, right? And how do you push back on that? And it's, slow rolling can go a long way. Just be like, definitely, boss. Yeah, for sure. Definitely looking into it. But it's about having a clear and frank discussion with your management about what is good for your stories, what is good for you as a reporter, because if they're paying you to be a reporter, they're not paying you to be like, you know, a beta tester for a bunch of weird tech. And you got to be really, really careful about it. It's tough. It's funny, I'm a technologist, but I'm a Luddite. Like, I sort of hate new tech in general by default. And I think that's a good mentality to have. Don't assume it's good because it's newer, right? Photos are still photos.
Okay, let me ask you, just before you hand over the mic, I was just going to ask you, how do you know? Because I know that artificial intelligence, one of the things that it does is that it helps people maximize, and I could be wrong on this because, hey, I'm just a journalist, I'm not a scientist, or I'm not a technology person. We're all technology people. If you use a mobile phone, a smartphone, you automatically become a technology person. But I might not be using the terms right? I might be interchanging algorithms, for instance, with artificial intelligence, because I know that algorithms leverage on artificial intelligence, or maybe they're one and the same thing. I don't know, you can correct me. But knowing that oftentimes people want to produce, especially now that we're in the world of clicks and likes and approvals and what have you, and views, and, you know, seeing how many people actually checked out a story till the end, don't this thing make journalists want to produce more of the kinds of things that they think that people like?
I think reporters, well, talk to your reporters. They might not want to always be producing more, right? Sometimes they want to produce the stories that are good, more so than, you know, especially if you're like an investigative reporter, like, yeah, you want to produce more investigative stories, but you also understand the work and the fact checking and just the pure effort that has to go into making a story that matters, that will hold up in often a court of law, unfortunately, especially the public opinion, the court of public opinion as well. You know, I think most reporters I've known in the last 15 years of my career actually hate chasing the clicks. They despise it so much. And like, it's actively ruined news organizations. A very good close friend of mine, going all the way back to university, he was head of social at BuzzFeed News for many years. And BuzzFeed News was an amazing organization that did really cracker investigative journalism. I just said cracker, I'm going with it. Investigative journalism and war reporting and everything, but it just got assumed by the parent company that got, of course, bought out by private equity to need those clicks. And now it's completely shut down because of that mentality of just having to do it. I mean, I'm not sure about in Nigeria, but the thing is, in the US, as Richard was saying, the internet didn't kill journalism. Private equity did. And then they used it as an excuse to say that all the ads went to Google or something, when really what happened is they bought up newspapers, loaded it with debt, and then sold off every single asset they could while trying to make the lowest quality content possible. And unfortunately, AI is going to assist in that part. The lower quality the content, the easier it will be to fire people, because if you only care about your return on investment in a newspaper, that's the problem.
It's a big challenge, you know. I think this is going to be to Joshua now, because right now you have said that we need to go micro. Community journalism will be the way to go. But we also see for that to, I don't know, for that to be profitable or for that to be sustainable, you have to find a funding model, or a funding model that is that works, that can keep it afloat, so to speak. And oftentimes people want to go wide for that to be able to happen. You need the coverage to make that happen. Do you have any suggestions as to how people can actually focus on the micro, but at the same time go wide in such a way that people don't begin to clash, but somehow are still sustainable?
I mean, every time you say, do I have a suggestion, I'm like, okay. but yes, because it's safe for me to just say it's a suggestion, right? If you look at, and I think it's a challenge that I've also seen with our media, that we think if it's not big, it's not rich or valuable, right? When we are able to, and I go back to the purpose, why are we in journalism? so that people can have answers to their problem. If it's 10 people that get the value I can pay and can pay for it, you are better stay with that, right? And it's also the challenge you've seen with journalism underserving a lot of the segment of the population, right? If I ask anybody here, where would you go to if you want to read anything about education, water resources, climate change? Probably don't have any of those reporters here, right? And that's because everybody wants to go after, you know, the guy, the president, and the big issues, right? Richard said something that was important, right? The small business owner who goes to Google is not going to Google so that someone in America buys that product. It's that when you are in that vicinity, when you're in that area and you're searching for where do I buy ABC, I know where to go to. So it's still local, right? And I think we just need to think micro and also think of you know, diversification as a way to, you know, aggregate multiple. I don't know if I'm making sense. So if I do agri journalism, I do health journalism, I do, you know, housing journalism, educational journalism, and if I have money to keep doing it as one newspaper, that serves a lot of purpose, right? But do I also have, we have 774 local government, but you do have 774, you know, media outlets to service those 774 local governments, right? One of the things when we were trying to experiment, and we're still experimenting with it, with Nubia, which is our AI product, is you have data about every community, county, council, country on African continent, right? If you go to World Bank database, right, you have, but who's using that data to tell the story, right? What if we could take that old data, right, and put it in AI and tell it to tell that story, or give a journalist that first context to use to improve or repurpose that story? That's something we're trying to do, and that's how we think you can leverage it. Don't say you want it to write 5,000 stories, you know, types of one story. How about 5,000, you know, segments of the population that you have not reached, right? I don't even know. When I was young, you could read newspaper as a kid. I don't think if kids between the age of 8 and 13 can read anything that, I mean, can access or consume journalism.
I don't know, too.
Right? And those are the things I think we need to begin to explore and things we need to begin to innovate. And it doesn't have to be digital to be innovative. I think that's another question we need to tell ourselves, right? It doesn't have to be digital to be innovative, right? It could be from the needs. I think needs will always be the way to think about it. What do people need? Indigenous language. There are hundreds of languages in Nigeria that nobody has explored for journalism, right? That's going macro. That's going micro to solve a macro issue, right?
Joshua, you know, I sincerely hope that our senators were not listening to you. I mean, I heard this from senior colleagues, and one of them is in the audience here. She told me about the idea that, you know, some senators thought to have a broadcast house in every senatorial district, which, you know, is not, I don't think that's what you have in mind. Certainly not, right?
No, that's not what I have in mind. Because why they want to do that, and it speaks, I mean, Richard said a lot of important things. Says politicians know how to reach everybody, right? They know the language to use to reach everybody. I think that if we were given an estate in the same realm with politicians, we said journalism is the fourth estate, right? It means we probably need to learn one or two things from how these guys think. We don't need to have, I'm not saying you need to have a radio station or a TV station, but I'm saying how do you reach those people in those places that have not been reached, right? Because politicians will go there, right? Businesses will go there.
They will.
You wonder how we can all have Coca-Cola, right? When we were younger, in every part of Nigeria. Why? Because it's about profit, right? So if you think from the place of profit, and I'm not saying capitalism, right? But social, you know, capital or social purpose of journalism, and we let that drive how we think about, you know, news consumption, production, distribution, I think I'm even speaking to distribution more than I'm talking about. Because the SDR theory of journalism, right? Storytelling, distribution, and revenue go together. How are we putting that together and using digital technology to answer the question? That's what I'm talking about. I mean, even if you give all the senatorial districts, what is the content?
Big question.
Right.
But I'm sure they'll find content for it. Let me quickly go once again to Serena. And I want to ask her, this is, as we wrap up now, and throw this to the audience, because I'm sure that they certainly will have questions for you. When you look at collaborative investigative journalism, and this is something that's beginning to catch on now in many media houses, we'd like to see more of it here in Nigeria. Do you see any role for artificial intelligence with regards to the future of journalism? Do you see any tools, for instance, that you want to recommend which could help with what you currently do, which is in investigative journalism? Is Serena still with us, or have we lost her? Oh dear, I'm so sorry about that.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, okay, fantastic. Okay, so yes.
I'm sorry, we are having some problems in the Zoom meeting, so I wasn't able to hear your question. Could you repeat, please?
Apologies about that. So let me just take that again. I was saying that when you look at the future of journalism and where you currently practice in the investigative journalism area, do you see any tools right now that are interesting? And do you see how we can actually push this to make maybe the future of journalism a little brighter in the area of collaborative investigative journalism?
Yes, I've got a wonderful experience in these almost 3 years of collaboration with the CCIJ, and we firmly believe in collaboration between reporters and data scientists, but also with the technologists and artists to bring everything we can to people, basically, to enjoy and to be able to access in every way they can. So yes, I see that's difficult, has been a difficult time through the pandemic and so on, but also digital tools are allowing us to be more connected. So yes, part of my job is actually to connect people more in virtual spaces and also work together as a team.
Are there any tools that you found particularly helpful and some that you might want to share?
Yes, we work with Spatial recently, which is a platform that you can use as a private or a company to build with the templates or to upload your rooms. And it's a platform specifically designed to allow people to create their avatars, so it has a high percentage of customization. And yes, I would totally recommend to try it. It's free and accessible to everybody.
Pardon me, what did you call the name of the tool again?
Spatial, like
Spatial.
in a spatial, in the space, the universe, spatial.io.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for that. Thank you. So, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, just to add to that, there's, if you're doing investigative journalism, there's 2 pieces of software that I'd recommend. One, Pinpoint that Richard mentioned that Google has, and an open source piece of software that does very similar things that I've worked on called Aleph, developed by the OCCRP, mostly Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, but actually was started during Code for Africa by my friend Friedrich Lindenberg. It's called Aleph, A-L-E-P-H. And if anybody has any questions on software around large-scale investigative journalism, please come and chat with me.
Thank you. I'll tell CJID not to charge you for advertising, but it's fine. I'm sure that's why we're here. I think we can throw this now to the audience, so the real journalists, to ask about your concerns, about your fears, about your, yeah, I see a hand up here already. That's 2, that's 3. Can I ask for your help, Tolulope, please? Okay. Okay, so the first one.
Hello, thank you. My name is Jamiu Folari. I call myself a lecturer, also a journalist. I say I'm a journalist by calling, a lecturer by choice. And investigation is the umbilical cord. And one of my lecturers, there are a lot of them here, at University of Lagos. That quotation drives what I do immediately after my graduation. And the quotation is from Dr. Amobi from University of Lagos. He said, news and technology are married. He who is not technological savvy will be thrown into the dustbin of history. And it is on that basis, from Mr. Adeleke, you mentioned the issue of impact of tech outside the West bubble. Are we saying outside the West bubble or outside the tech bubble? Professor Pate and many of my lecturers told us about technological determinism. And our emphasis here point to the assumptions of this technological determinism, that technology drives social change. But we have not been able to analyze the impact of social change, which theorists call social construction of media technology. We talk about economic pressure, we talk about our audience, we talk about regulations. So how can we use, for example, you talk, Mr. Joshua talk about we should not look at digital alone to innovate. What of African solution to the challenge of journalism, to the future of journalism? We've been talking about the West, we're talking about technology. How can we look at the unique intervention of African solution to the challenge of journalism so that we'll be able to take it to the right perspective? Thank you.
Well, it is very interesting. I don't know whether you want to elaborate a bit more.
Can you distill the question?
Yes.
So I know exactly what to answer, because you said a lot.
Yes, he did.
Just one sentence.
Okay. You said cryptocurrency is overhyped. We have every technology, when they come, they are overhyped. That what is now the African solution to the challenge of journalism, apart from technology? What are other factors, variables, social factors that we'll look at apart from technology?
Do we have enough time? I've spent the last 3 years of my life writing about it. So, oh God, where do you start from? Outside of technology, the fundamental problem that journalism faces on the continent is financing. But it is easy to say, very difficult to solve. Advertising is not enough. Subscriptions cannot work in this market. Yes, they can't. Except you're multi-choice. If you're not multi-choice, then it's not going to work. The membership model is very much untested. People are not inclined to donate to journalism. Even if they have the resources, your request for their money is competing with their need for food and entertainment. So there are all these socio-economic problems that journalism is facing. So I can't sit here and tell you that I have an answer to a question that I have spent the last 10 years of my life looking for an answer to. I still don't have. Do you understand? But what I can say is that media companies should be more willing to experiment with business models. That's one thing that I love Premium Times for, right? Because I'm always watching the space. When Premium Times published, they said they were taking donations. I was very impressed right? Because not many companies in Africa will come and say, come and donate to us. For example, Rest of World we're a non-profit, right? So that means we're not chasing advertising clicks. But fairly recently, we introduced a donate to us button, and it has been very effective. So just be willing to innovate. I think Zikoko did this too last year or 2 years ago, where they were asking people to donate. I don't know what the response has been, but it just speaks to a willingness to try something new. And that's something that you don't see a lot in this market. People think because it has always been like this, it will always be like this. That's the biggest lie you can tell yourself. And that's also another problem that journalism is facing all over the world. Because journalists think this is how journalism has always been, and this is how it will always be, forgetting that journalism is a fairly new profession in the grand scheme of things. 100 or 200 years ago, we didn't have journalism as it is today. It has evolved. The journalism that we are practicing today, the business models that we are working with today, will probably not be the business models that will be prominent in 50 years from now. So just be willing to experiment. That's the only thing that I can say.
Okay, thank you. That was brief, yes.
Good day. I am Maimuna Alkali. You keep talking about the...
Your name again,
Ooh,
sorry.
please.
I am Maimuna Ahmad Alkali. I'm a recent graduate of Nile University. You keep talking about tools to equip yourself
Sorry,
for...
who's your question for?
Yeah?
Your question, who is it for?
I think it's a general question for the practitioners and the speakers as well.
Okay.
You keep talking about tools to equip yourself with, but then we don't talk about the people you're equipping with these tools. Because in school, data journalism and innovative journalism was not really emphasized. It was rather broadcast media and print media, then radio and what. But then data journalism, I found out about data journalism in my final year, and I was really interested. But then it was not really emphasized. It was just the history and the concepts that was explained. So is there any proposition to NUC to incorporate and emphasize more on data journalism and innovative journalism?
It's a big question. It's more about our curriculum catching up with the innovations that are coming up within the industry.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. And it's one challenge I know CJID started about 5 years ago to respond to, right? The question of pedagogy, matching practice, right? And one of the things that I remember, now I'm advertising for JJID now, did was to go to the universities and, talk to the lecturers and say, fact-checking, data journalism, investigative journalism, all of these things you don't teach your students. Can we begin to, work together? Right? And that was how Campus Reporters started, right? And I know a lot of campus reporters that are here that are also now entrepreneurs, right? I think the way to answer that question is to say to our lecturers, in here, or just teachers generally, that you also need to keep up as much as possible and also take advantage of the resources of the practitioners. We need more practitioners in classrooms, right, to come share. They don't need, I don't think people need a PhD before they should be able to teach data journalism. I don't have a PhD, and I run a data journalism platform. So we need to begin to embrace. And it's interesting that I think the Nigerian curriculum is just recently unbundled to, do all of these things. So back to policy also. Government also taking advantage of some of these innovative things and also ensuring that they are financing the curriculum or the pedagogy to be able to catch up. Sorry about that. But another thing I also would say to challenge you and other people is don't stick with what you learn in the classroom. Hack academics. Academics, right? You need to, you didn't learn how to use phone in the classroom, did you? So why are you staying with the classroom to learn journalism, right? Use the phone, use the TikTok and the rest of them to also learn. I think that the people need to be able to be problem solvers and not always throwing the problems at institutions.
Thank you very much for that. I see a few more hands. Yes, please.
Yes. So, Chris, you mentioned the negative appearance of artificial intelligence. And I think it's important for this panel to touch on the issue of ethics. So, ethics is one of those negative appearance. And would you like to explore at what point should journalists then begin to understand that this is an ethical boundary? That even while you're leveraging technology, while you're leveraging artificial intelligence, to enhance the work that we do, at what point should we know that, no, here I'm not supposed to go beyond this point? Because there is a way in which we can, utilize these tools, and then we are contributing to the problems. So can we take some moment, to just talk about that? And I'd like Chris to start, and maybe Joshua to also speak to it. Thank you.
The ethics don't change. That's the honest answer, is use them the same way you would use a spell check. In that, verify everything they write. Make sure that you're not putting anything out there that you haven't checked yourself as well. It can be a first draft, but you're the editor. Your name has to be the one that actually puts it out, or the writer, whoever's byline it is. So just stick to the same ethics you've always had. They're not, this isn't some brave new world where you have to, throw everything to the wind. Stick with what you know, stay true to the ethics, don't make stuff up. Don't let the computer do it.
Yeah, I think you said everything. If the purpose, I keep going back to the purpose, right? The value of journalism is to inform the people. It's public interest, right? Always ask yourself that question. Whatever I'm doing, the process that I'm using to go about this practice, right? Is it for the interest of the public, right? Why do I want to exaggerate the number just so that people will click, right? Why do I want to, malign someone's, name or interest just because he abused me yesterday or he did something wrong to me? Is that of interest to the public, right? Or why do I want to, propagate, right? Why? I think for those that, that go about that affair, you would definitely know that they are not journalists, because journalists will know that public interest, is most paramount. And if you use that as a compass for all that you do, I guess we can always stay safe, even when we use artificial intelligence or every other tool, to help our work.
How many more questions can we take? Do we have time for?
Oh, jeez.
Okay. One more.
Sorry, my name is Ramatullah Jaro. I'm from the Gambia. I am so happy to be here, and it's a pleasure to be part of this beautiful but interesting and interactive conference. I have something for Mr. David Akeke. I think I got your name right? Yes, okay. I'm from Gambia though. Some names are kind of funny, but we are all Africans.
The effort. Thank you.
All right. As African journalists, there are challenges to practice and do our work right for the daily information we disseminate. But there is this electricity problem in Africa. For us to go into the internet and do certain research is a daily problem, because you sit in your house or in your office, you have your laptop either in your office or in your house, and you want to do some research on a topic that you want to disseminate to the public, and suddenly, boom, electricity is nowhere. And for the media house you're working for to sometimes generator is a problem. We have the sun, but we are not making use of it by having solar systems everywhere. What do we do as journalists, as African journalists. That is number one. Two, what I want to add up is we journalists, we should be creative. We should think outside the box within the newsroom. It's not only a coverage that comes, you just write about it. Either you're patronizing the government or you're patronizing individual or companies or institutions. But go outside, that is mean you go to the last person in that country that you reside, that you live in, and do more of human stories. Use the local language so that people will understand what you want to tell them. Because we have so many human stories in Africa. But we are solely government, politics this, politics that, this man is this man is that. Let's go out and be creative. Use the mind to be somebody, like I can say a shadow under the sun for somebody.
I think your question is taken. Thank you very much for your suggestion.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What can we do as journalists? I mean, goodness, where do I start from?
In a situation where there is no light.
In a situation where there is, where you have electricity challenges, I think this may not be the best answer to your question, but I will try. I think one of the things that I still love about being an African is we are still collectivist in nature. And that means, unlike Western societies that tend to be individualistic, we still value community. Mm-hmm. We still value being around people and asking people for help. So I think a possible solution to that problem could be an instance where journalists within a specific local community come together, pull together resources, and try to solve those problems together. And I'm saying this because I know a few months ago, I was privileged to speak to the U.S. mission in Nigeria has this series of events, and one of the sessions I held was with American Spaces, and then there were all these different American Spaces in different parts of Nigeria. I mean, I was talking to people in Kano. I didn't know that I was talking to groups of people until they turned on their cameras to ask questions, and then I saw that, for example, there are people from Kano in this place, people from Gombe State in this place, people from Lagos in this place. I thought I was speaking to individuals because their cameras are off. And what that told me was that it's still possible for us to have those little silos, of journalists coming together, shared interests. In this particular context, people could pull together their resources to solve those problems. But I find it difficult to think of anything beyond that because, I mean, we can't really trust our governments to solve these problems for us anymore. We've been trusting them for decades, and that hasn't gotten us anywhere. So I think that could be a possible solution to what you're asking. I hope that helps. All right.
Well, thank you very much. I have to thank you all for your questions. And I'm just going to give my panelists 30 seconds right now to wrap up their thoughts on this subject: artificial intelligence, digital innovations, and the future of journalism. Who wants to go first?
I think I'll borrow from the wisdom you just mentioned and say, for our context, we need to be collaborative and co-create some of these solutions. If we work alone, it's going to be very, harder and, difficult. Can we bring our energies together? Can we bring technologies, journalists, psychologists, even come together and think about how do we create those solutions that are, useful for our own context? I guess that's my own final words. Let's be creative. Let's co-create. Stop competing when you don't even have anything to compete for.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask, because Busola raised the question of ethics, right? And it's very important. You said something about how journalists shouldn't make figures up. Do not, how will I put it? Don't cook things up. But if you find people online who are cooking things up that are harmful, misinformation, using all manner of technology, deep fakes, etc., isn't it okay if journalists also explore those same tools to see how they could counter it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely not, or absolutely?
We can use the tools to counter, right? That's what I mean.
Okay.
We can use the tool to counter.
It would not be unethical?
To use those, we're not going to create deep fakes. We would never do that. We should never do that, right? But the tools that they are using to do that, we can use them to amplify truth, facts, right? And also see if we can explore it for the magnitude and the speed at which they go. I think that's it. Can we think of how to arrest this misinformation, disinformation fast, and be able to counter it very fast? Because at the end of the day, that's what they're also doing. It's just one information put into different, forms and making it go fast. So that means you want to go at the same pace, right? There's this, I'm sorry I have to come this way. There's this word in the Christian scripture that says that the children of this world knows how to use money well or something, than the children of God. And I always would say journalists should also be able to know how to use these tools well, to inform the people that have been disinformed by propaganda machines and structures or institutions. I guess that's how I kind of think we should go about. We should never, like I said before, public interest, right, is why we do what we do, is why we use the tools that we use, right? But no, why should we ever use?
In those same ways, I totally get your point. Thank you very much for your thoughts, Joshua Olufemi. Christopher, do you want to quickly intervene?
I'd like to echo those exact statements and add that concepts are more important than tools, because tools will change, a company will go under, another company will come up, what have you. But the way that they work fundamentally is what actually matters in that case, and it's the same with journalism, right? Whether you're publishing a documentary video or an investigative report or a fact check, fundamentally the reporting is still the same. It's still journalism all the way down. And remembering that and not getting overwhelmed, but instead trying to see what it's trying to do or in how it's doing it is absolutely the most important thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris.
Okay, my 30 seconds, right? So I think right now, artificial intelligence is still unable to come up with original ideas, and essentially what it does is to curate. And that means AI is not yet sentient. And that means for us, there is still room for personality, there's still room for original thought. So as journalists, we need to understand that if you're the type of person who is consistently riffing off other people's work, it's just a matter of time before you become sidelined. But if you invest in original thought, do the hard work of thinking for yourself, how can I stand out? What are the things that I need to learn? What are the things that I need to do to be able to be better tomorrow than I was yesterday? I think if you invest in those things, then you're definitely going to be relevant for a very long time to come.
Well, I don't want to say you're shaking the table of the blogs, but hey, it's certainly food for thought.
Yeah, blogs are relevant now, so.
Thank you so much for your thoughts there. Serena, if you can still hear us, we would like your own 30 seconds on the topic, artificial intelligence, digital innovation, and the future of journalism.
Thank you. Yes, I totally subscribe what I've just heard from the other panelists. I strongly believe in collaboration in journalism, especially now that I'm part of the team of the CCAJ. And so in the future, I hope to see much collaboration, much involvement from the citizens of the various spaces we report on, and more data science that we can share globally with everybody.
Well, thank you so much. On this note, I'd like to say a very big thank you to my panelists. You guys have been awesome. Please, a round of applause for Serena Stelitano of the Center for Collaborative Investigative Journalism. Thank you for your very kind recommendations on tools that have worked for you. Just in case you didn't catch it, Spatial is one of them that she recommended. And Chris also recommended Alif, just in case you didn't catch that. And also to thank you that have been seated right here with me, David Adeleke, Africa editor, Rest of the World. You said to understand the things that stay the same, we should understand the things that stay the same so that we can remain relevant. Stop chasing, don't chase the wind, all right? And also Christopher, thank you so much. He's with Duke's Reporters Laboratory. Thank you so much for your thoughts. And Joshua Olufemi, founder and publisher of Data Fight. Very interesting thoughts that have been shared here this afternoon. Once more, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your questions as well.